Welcome. Today we are going to be creating a scratch art paper in your visual journals. For this project and this activity, you will need crayons, you will need black tempera paint that has been mixed with baby oil to help create a smooth, flexible surface. You will need a long-handled wide brush. You also may need a small watercolor brush. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is create a waxy surface on our page that we will then be able to paint over and scratch through. For today, you want to go ahead and select, I like to stick to about 3 colors. You could always do more than that. And you're going to simply start coloring on one of your visual journal pages to create a waxy ground. As you're coloring, it's very important with this activity to make sure there is no white paper being exposed. If you have that, then you will not be able to scratch there. The paint will simply soak into any white paper areas. So you want to create a sealed, waxy surface with your crayons. You can certainly, try to create some intricate designs if you want. Maybe my colors would be put down in shapes, or you can just color the surface of your paper and make sure that you don't miss any areas. Okay, so I would continue all the way around until the full corners of this paper. Here is an example of one that I have finished coloring, and I'm checking to make sure there are no spaces where my white paper is exposed for a really good scratch. Okay, so once you have done that, you want to make sure that you place a copier sheet behind your page. So for example, if I was in the book, I would take this and I want to place it in towards my binding before I paint. For this example, I have the page loose and I'm going to make sure I have my copy paper underneath it. We will be using tempera paint, which has been mixed with baby oil, as I described earlier. This will help us to get a nice even ground. I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to simply paint over my wax crayon. Okay. Now, you want to make sure that you get it as even as you can, as thick as you can, so that you do not see any of that crayon going through, which may mean that you have to paint it several coats, and that's just fine. Okay. And you can see some of my colors coming through there, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to paint this until I get a nice solid surface of black over my crayon. Going all the way to the edges. Okay, so there's my first coat, and now I'm going to go ahead and just continue to add coats. You can also turn your book or your paper and create more of a crosshatch pattern. This also helps to get solid coverage. So now I've turned my paper to landscape, and I'm going to paint up and down across my landscape oriented paper. Okay, so once you have coated your paper in the black tempera paint, there are a couple of choices. You can directly scratch into your wet paper while your paint is still wet, or you can let it dry and scratch afterwards. Make sure you wash your brush really well before you move on to this next step. So to direct scratch, I'm going to actually take the end of a paintbrush, which I will make sure to wash off in the sink and wipe off. And if you're going to direct scratch, you can take your paintbrush and draw directly into your wet paper. And you can see it's going to scrape away or scratch away that black tempera paint, revealing my crayon colored surface below. Okay, I just like to kind of have fun with it. I always seem to end up drawing trees. You can obviously draw anything you want to. Just make sure you have filled the space, utilized the space, and at least included 3 elements of art. So I have obviously some pattern in here, some shape. Maybe I want to add some texture. Maybe we have some pine trees in the distance. I always caution people to try not to overly scratch things away. You want to leave some of that contrast by the places that you have the black paint and the places that have then been scratched, and we can see the color coming through. So try to check yourself so you don't overly scratch. Okay, so this would be an example of direct painting on my wet paper. So that would be one option, and you can actually do both if you would like to. This is a paper that I have let dry and then scratched into it. If you choose to do this, you would have to let it set out on the drying rack until the next day. Then you will grab some scratch art tools, which are in the drawers labeled scratch art tools, okay? You have a metal tipped with a red handle, and you also have just some wooden scratch tools, okay? And you can see with these that you can also go in and scratch away. This might be an option if you want to be able to rest your hand on the surface of the paper more easily. When it's wet and you're directly scratching into it, that can be more difficult to do that. So I'm gonna remove some of these areas completely. I want this to look like there's a swing here. I wanna make sure that I have some patterns. I do like this when I'm scratching in there directly, that I can add some shapes. I can add some interest. Okay, so again, you have two options. You can either directly scratch into the wet paint, or you can let it dry and then scratch away your black paint later. Okay, and like I said, I like to leave some areas very just drawn. I like to go in and totally remove some of the paint in certain areas so that I have more of an opaque shape represented. Okay, got the little swing there. So, just a fun technique for you to try. This is the wooden stick scratcher tool. This one gives me a little bit of a thicker line. So you can choose whichever tool you think is the best for you. I'm gonna remove all this area around the little chicken in the corner. Okay, so my suggestion would be to paint it and let it dry, just because I think it's a little easier. But if you wanna directly scratch into it while it's wet, you can. Or maybe do a combination of both. Maybe you're going to directly scratch just your larger shapes, let it dry, and then come back. All right, thank you.